All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel. I'm Maddie here, and welcome back to Meta Monday, the weekly series where we analyze the Pokemon Pocket metagame and keep you guys up to date on everything going on in the competitive world of Pokemon Pocket. This past weekend was PMPT number 16. Very interesting tournament, over 530 competitors. We're going to go over the results of the tournament, talk about all of the deck lists, and I'm going to give you my meta update of what's been kind of going on here. I think it's like the fourth week of Crimson Blaze. It actually might be more than that. I honestly forget. We should be getting an announcement like sometime in the next week of the next set, B2, coming to Pokemon Pocket, which is going to be a very big deal. Ranked battles are also out right now, but we have some other information to share with you, and that is, of course, going to be this weekend's tournament coming. That is PMPT number 17. This is the Crimson Qualifier. This is actually a pretty special tournament because it is our last tournament, our last like actual tournament of our sort of internal community season that we've been running. And what this means is that after this weekend, the following weekend, we're going to be doing our PMPT Invitational tournament, kind of like a championship series tournament where we're actually going to be crowning a champion for this entire season, I guess. What we've been doing is keeping track of the results through all of our community tournaments. We have like a leaderboard, and then the top X amount of people, we've yet to determine that, are going to be invited to this tournament, and the winner is, the actual, just sort of the champion. I don't know. We'll figure it out in more detail, so, stay tuned for more information coming. But yes, we have our last chance qualifier tournament, PMPT number 17. Everyone's able to play in this. It's just a normal tournament. It's just the last one of the season, so definitely go and register. $150 in the prize pool this week. No sponsor. Insert your sponsor here. We're open to be sponsored for sure. Let us know. But anyway, link to register is going to be down in the description below. I'm still sick, by the way. If I'm coughing or if I sound a little bit off in this video, I apologize. Another update is that we should be going live with ranked battles on YouTube and on Twitch soon, either tonight or sometime later this week. Kind of waiting to feel a little bit better, but I want to go live and do more live streams, right? Because ranked is out. So anyway, keep that in mind. Let's get right into this. So we're going to start off this video by going over the final standings. We'll break down all of the top placing deck lists. And then at the end, we'll do our metagame analysis where we break down all of the metagame data. So that's typically how these go. You can navigate throughout the video using the timestamps down below. This is a long intro. We've been talking for like 2.5 minutes. People probably skip ahead anyway, but it's all good. Let's get into the final standings here from this past weekend's PMPT number 16. And here we are. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. But yeah, this is it, guys. So shout out to Brago TCG playing Magnezone Oricorio, 13-1. Did get first place. So Magnezone Oricorio getting yet another first place finish at the PMPT tournament series. At this point, I think we need to realize that this season is basically a very accurate reflection of last season. In fact, if you take a look at these standings, nothing here should probably surprise you based around, what we've been kind of playing with and what the metagame's been looking like over the last, a couple of months since Mega Rising came out realistically. Now, the buff to Magnezone Oricorio is significant, and not only did Brago TCG get first place, but also Froggy X Wawin from France also got third place here with Magnezone Oricorio, and PGX Marco from Chile, fifth place with Magnezone Oricorio. So, three different, top 8 finishes for Magnezone Oricorio this weekend. Definitely a dominant performance. We'll break it all down later in the video. But in second place, we've got Pokemonster, from the United States, 11-3. He made it to Grand Finals playing Suicune and Greninja, similar to what the Grand Finals was a couple of weeks ago. However, this time Magnezone Oricorio getting the win in Grand Finals this week. Gosu from Japan was playing Hydreigon and Mega Absol. This is actually like the only Hydreigon other than Porygon 3 here in 21st place. But he got 4th place from Japan, Gosu. And then Chewat from Thailand, another Suicune Greninja here in 6th place. And then 7th and 8th place, Froggy X Atomics and Yayer from the United States and from France. They were 7th and 8th place. They were playing Altaria Giratina. And we had a couple more Altarias throughout, top 16 and top 32 or whatever. It was actually the most popular deck, I think in total, or the most popular Pokemon in total this weekend. And specifically, it was Altaria and Greninja, which was definitely one of the most dominant decks throughout this entire tournament. But it was double Altaria Giratina EX, the deck that we actually featured a couple of days ago that I spoke really highly about, was the 2 Altaria representations in top 8. We had a traditional Altaria deck here, 9th place, Flyberson. And if we go down here, Venturi XD from France in 12th place, also playing Mega Altaria, but with Chingling, which means they probably weren't playing like Indeedee, I would imagine. But another very similar traditional Mega Altaria deck. We even had a Steelix right here. RZLBY, Rizzleby from Indonesia, 14th place, playing Mega Steelix and Skarmory. This was definitely a nice little surprise here. And then we have Bud and Terrence from Italy. He was playing Suicune and Gyarados. This is a really fun deck. We'll talk about it in a little bit. And then we had a Venusaur here, TB Pape from Switzerland, 7-2-1, 20th place, playing Mega Venusaur EX. We had a Blaziken down here, 22nd place, Decidueye, 25th place, and Jolteon down here in 37th place. So those are all of the top placing decks, or all of the players here at the top of the standings. Big congratulations to all of them. Shout out to them. Now let's break down the deck lists and we'll talk about them in a little bit more detail. So first off is going to be Brago's deck, the first place deck of the tournament. This is Magnezone Oricorio. So I think most people understand this deck, and they're probably pretty familiar with it, especially since Crimson Blaze came out and we got the updated sort of, version of Magnezone Oricorio. Over the last sort of, 3-4 weeks, this deck list has been performing very well, and it's been pretty significant in the metagame, but it's been updated, right? So we have the new Magnemite here, which only has 50 HP, but that's fine because we can search it with Lycia, which actually is a little bit better than just having 60 HP in most scenarios, but it does 30 damage, and that can KO a Chingling. It's actually a really nice card. It's a nice improvement to Magnezone Oricorio. We are playing the traditional Volt Charge Magneton from Genetic Apex, and now we're also playing the new Magnezone from Crimson Blaze. This is the one with a little bit more HP. In the Mirror Shot attack, which is a broken attack, 90 damage, and then you have a 50-50 chance to shut down your opponent's Pokemon effectively on their next turn. It's like Sleep. It might as well just be Sleep, but they can retreat from it. So that's the only difference between the Mirror Shot effect and Sleep. It's not an actual status condition. You have to retreat to clear that effect, and you can't play PCL. So they're similar, but they're a little bit different, of course, to Oricorio. One PCL, one Copycat, one Cyrus, one Clement, one Guzma, and one red card, one Cape as well. So a lot of one-ofs in this deck list, but realistically, when you're playing one Clement to search for Magneton, and you're playing one Lycia to search for your Magnemites, you don't really need double Copycat, so we're only playing one Copycat, double Research. A very consistent deck, and we're also actually playing one Guzma. Rocky Helmet is very, very common in the metagame right now. One of the more interesting interactions that we noticed at this weekend was that Altaria Giratina deck, which plays double Indeedee and Rocky Helmets. That is a matchup where, if Altaria is not playing like the non-EX Altaria, like neither player has any opportunity really to win the game in under 30 turns. So it like almost always goes to a tie. We probably had some scenarios like that this weekend that the judges had to handle, but luckily Magnezone and Altaria didn't like meet in finals or in top 4 or anything, but I'm sure it happened multiple times throughout the tournament, but this is a very, very strong deck list. And honestly, I'm not too surprised by this deck list here, but what I do understand is that a lot of the most popular decks that have risen up in popularity, especially since Ranked has come out, are all deck lists that really don't appreciate the Magnezone Oricorio matchup, right? I'm talking Suicune Greninja, I'm talking Altaria Greninja. What else am I talking about? Just any Altaria deck realistically gets beat pretty heavily by Magnezone Oricorio, even if they are playing small Altaria. Like it just ends up being a really difficult matchup because there's not that many options to KO Oricorio, and this is just a really strong deck into most Altaria matchups, specifically Altaria Greninja. We'll take a look at the win rate later, but this is a deck list that thrived in that matchup, and as we saw, beat Suicune Greninja in the final. So a very strong meta call, and again, very reflective of what the last season was, where new decks saw play early on in the season, and then people gravitate towards Suicune because they know that Suicune is just the best deck still, and then Suicune ends up winning, and then there's sort of a counter reaction, and then an anti-meta deck like Magnezone or Oricorio ends up winning. I think the exact same thing happened when Mega Rising came out, so we're seeing a very, very similar meta progression as we did last season. And to be honest, it's mostly all of the same decks. I do think Magnezone or Oricorio has a bit more like validity this season just because it's been buffed, but everything else is basically the same. There's nothing else new that's like that significant. I do think that Hydreigon was extremely common early on this season, but I don't really consider Hydreigon like a really strong option. That might be a bit different in tournament play, at least, because Magnezone or Oricorio, of course, winning the tournament this weekend means it's probably going to see a bit more play. One of the few decks that is really considered like a meta deck that can handle Magnezone or Oricorio very well is Hydreigon. That is really the only upside to playing Hydreigon right now in the current metagame, because that deck list, while strong, is a bit of just a high roll slop deck, and it actually has losing matchups into basically everything relevant in the metagame, but it beats Magnezone or Oricorio. So we might see some more Hydreigon, but anyway, that's a bit of a tangent here. Let's take a look at Pokemonster's second place deck list here, playing Suicune and Greninja. We'll notice we're not playing any Frogadier. So, people ask me all the time, like, Frogadier is definitely just not a bad card to play in this deck list, because most people will play it for Chingling. I've told people before, it doesn't really matter if you're playing the middle evolution unless you get it on your second turn and you're like going first or whatever. Most of the time, it's just not a card that's necessarily going to counterplay Chingling. It is going to slightly improve your Chingling matchup, but it's just a nice card to more consistently get into Greninja, right? Because we're only playing 2 rare candies in the deck, so after we kind of get that first Greninja down with rare candy, it can be a little bit awkward, so Frogadier does help with that in terms of consistency, but this is a deck list not playing Frogadier, and I think that's totally fine. Suicune Greninja can kind of operate with just sort of 1 Greninja on the board most of the time, and as we know, Suicune Greninja, still one of the most played decks in the game. It was the most popular deck this weekend. And still one of the best decks, quite frankly. And, you know, when its matchup into the new Magnezone or Oricorio, like, isn't even that bad. It's probably like a 60-40 matchup. So it's definitely winnable, but I would say that Magnezone or Oricorio is definitely one of the counter Suicune decks in the metagame. So no surprise, you know, that Suicune Greninja kind of found its way into grand finals. It's just such a strong deck that inevitably, if enough people are playing it, you know, it's just going to kind of find its way later into the bracket. I believe he beat the Hydreigon. This player beat the Hydreigon player in top 4, which again is a winning matchup for Suicune Greninja, so it just sort of fell that way. I think that if we go back to the standings, and I have nothing really else to say about this deck, honestly, it's just Suicune Greninja. If we go back to the standings, these Magnezone players hit each other in top 4, so we were guaranteed a Magnezone matchup in the finals, but it was either going to be playing against Suicune Greninja or Hydreigon. And coincidentally, Hydreigon just did not win that matchup, so, you know, Magnezone or Oricorio had a little bit of an easier time. If Hydreigon had beat Suicune in top 4, it probably would have also just beaten Magnezone or Oricorio, and we could have easily seen Hydreigon win this weekend. So that's sort of the story of the standings. The way that the brackets panned out, we were guaranteed a Magnezone in grand finals after top 4, and Suicune was the one that kind of moved on. So I think that's sort of a big reason why Magnezone probably won the tournament, is just because, and that's why there's so many of them hype in the standings, is because so many of the popular decks in day 2 were decks that really just can't beat Magnezone or Oricorio very well. And I think that this was just sort of a perfect week to make day 2 playing Magnezone or Oricorio. Having 500 players, we were just above the 8-round threshold, which meant that our day 2 was actually a bit more condensed. There was less players in day 2 than there typically would be. So we had, I think, just under 64 people in day 2, 62, I believe, people in day 2. So it was a bit more of a condensed metagame, and Magnezone or Oricorio was definitely pretty popular. I guess we could take a look, but anyway, let's move on here to Gosu's deck. This is going to be the 4th place deck, the highest placing Hydreigon deck of the tournament here, and this is also fairly standard. I know some people have been playing Furfrou in Hydreigon, but I also really just think that Chingling is still such a really good card. It's really good in the mirror matchup, and it's also going to be good into Suicune. Greninja's seeing a lot of play with Altaria, so I just really appreciate Chingling in Hydreigon. Most of the time, like, unless you kind of get the turn 2 Hydreigon out, you don't really want to lead Dino. Also, in the face of a Chingling, it can be a little bit awkward, but this deck plays double Rocky Helmet, so, you know, Chingling on Chingling, like, double Rocky Helmet typically gives you the advantage there, and I just really like this deck list. You'll see some people definitely playing like the Indeedee version with with Giant Cape. That's definitely not a bad version in some matchups, but I think that at least like in tournament play, it really just kind of feels like the Rocky Helmet, more aggressive version of Hydreigon is kind of the better way to play it. Also, no middle evolutions, right? So you got to keep that in mind. No Zweilous here and no Frogadier in both the Suicune and Hydreigon deck. So the highest placing sort of rare candy decks were not playing middle evolutions. Not that Magnezone or Oricorio typically plays Chingling, but you know, in general, it's honestly, it's not something that I would play if I was playing either of these decks. I wouldn't run the middle evolution, but One Leap over Absol, which again, I do think is a valuable card in the deck list. It's just sort of a strong card. There's some slower decks in the metagame, right? I mean, if you're going up against Altaria, it can be nice to maybe 2-hit KO a Swablu before they can evolve, or just get enough damage down. Absol is just a really good card. So one Absol, one Chingling, I do like. This way, you know, we have 5 basic Pokemon in the deck, so we're minimizing the odds to lead off with Mega Absol. Yeah, I mean, this is just a deck that kind of struggles. Like specifically, like, how do I even describe it? It just doesn't love going up against like Pokemon that have more than 140 HP, which is like most Pokemon. But also like Suicune Greninja plays Giant Capes, they play Irida, you know, Altaria, Blaziken, all of those decks have like Mega Pokemon, so they have a lot of HP. Like Hydreigon's a really good card, but it's definitely reliant on sort of that high roll, like early game combo potential, right? And yet again, getting shut down by Chingling. So there's just a lot of things things I don't love about Hydreigon right now, but the only upside to playing it realistically is that you don't have to worry about Magnezone or Oricorio. So maybe that becomes more of a factor as time goes on. But I do like this list, and this is actually a little bit more common as far as Hydreigon lists that do well in tournaments go. Just more of aggressive, like no Indeedee here. We're playing Absol, we're playing double Rocky Helmet, one Pokemon Center Lady. And the Pokemon Center Lady is actually a really big deal. And I actually like it a bit more than Indeedee, given the current state of the metagame, because of how many Altaria decks are seeing play and how many times that Swablu is going to try to put you asleep, especially like throughout a tournament, right? So PCL is sort of counterplay to that. You know, if you have it in hand, it can operate basically the same way, right, as an Indeedee does, where you kind of use Roar in unison, you take 30 damage and then you heal it back up, right? So it just sort of operates in the same vein. And again, Rocky Helmet plus Hyper Ray, that's a bit more damage. And again, it's going to help you in the Chingling head-to-head. So I like that version of the deck. I really do. Smart play by Gosu. Really like the deck list. Hydreigon, a little bit suspect. I've been going on a rant about Hydreigon just because I never really understood like the purpose of playing it. I know I just described to you that it's like, you know, it's a strong deck list and it's good into Magnezone or Oricorio, but like from a meta progression standpoint, I really think Hydreigon is like stunting the meta growth. And I've said this from time to time. The reason I think that is because it doesn't beat Suicune Greninja. It doesn't really beat a lot of the Altaria decks. So it's like, why are we playing a deck that specifically beats Magnezone or Oricorio? Like, are we trying to counterplay the counter deck? Like, do we want Suicune not to win, right? And that's kind of what Magnezone or Oricorio is helping us do. So I don't feel like we should be playing against Magnezone or Oricorio. We should be, you know, encouraging it, I guess, to some degree, unless we just want Suicune to win. Like, if more people play Hydreigon, then Suicune will just win. That's the reality of the metagame. So there is definitely a bit of a, you know, a rock, paper, scissors type of thing going on. It really is like Suicune at the top, Magnezone kind of beating Suicune, Hydreigon beating Magnezone, Suicune beating Hydreigon. So there's that rock, paper, scissors. And then the Altaria stuff is really just sort of there. Altaria can always win. It's something that, you know, struggles into Magnezone, but kind of can hold its own into Suicune, Greninja, and Hydreigon. So it's kind of a weird deck there. But anyway, that's enough talking here. Let's go and talk about Froggy X Atomix's deck, which is going to be the Mega Altaria and Indeedee and Giratina deck list. Now, like I said, this is a deck list that does not play Baby Altaria or the non-EX Altaria, which in my mind, you could easily just sort of play that card. I know a lot of people, when I brought this deck up, they were like, well, what do you do against Oricorio Magnezone? I'm like, well, you just tie. It's just a tie. Like, neither player can really win. They're going to hit you for 50 every turn, and you're healing for 40 every turn. And that might sound like eventually you're going to lose, but Mega Altaria has 190 HP. It's got 190 HP. Giratina has 150, and we're playing one Pokemon Center Lady. So the game will never end within the 30-turn limit. Now, in ranked battles, that just means you're going to tie. But in tournament play, in the rules around ties and whatnot, like oftentimes, you know, it'll just end up with like the judges making a decision, probably in Magnezone or Oricorio's favor for the most part. It is winnable for either player technically. It's just not that common. It's a very tieable matchup. So this is a deck list where, like, if I'm, excuse me, if I'm playing it in tournament, I probably would play the Baby Altaria. I know not a lot of people did. And that probably ended up coming back to bite them in the butt a little bit in day two when they kind of inevitably ran into the Magnezone or Oricorios. But this is a very strong deck. This is a deck I think that is just hyper consistent and just a strong deck. It can beat basically everything in the game, like Sans, of course, Magnezone or Oricorio. But it does extremely, extremely well into a lot of like the fringe meta decks. Basically, anything that's not like Altaria Greninja or Suicune and Greninja is probably just going to lose to this deck because it's just too much healing, too much HP, too much damage, and it's too consistent. So its win rate overall of this tournament, I think, was really, really high in comparison to the other decks. But I don't think its matchups into like Suicune Greninja or Altaria Greninja were that good. I think Greninja probably kind of beats this deck in a lot of ways because we're not really playing a lot of disruption. But this deck is just so consistent. Like, it just does. All three of these Pokemon are attacking options. We're playing Giratina EX with Psychic Energy. It's a really, really strong deck list. And it does not care about Chingling at all, which is pretty cool. You know, the Rocky Helmets in red to boost damage. It's just a very straightforward deck that's very consistent and strong. Again, it will lose to the Greninja high roll stuff just because Greninja's broken. But, you know, it's the Greninja stuff isn't that consistent, right? I mean, maybe for Suicune it is. But this is a deck that doesn't care about consistency. It's just like my deck is always going to do what it wants to do, and it kind of thrives in that operation. So this is a really strong deck here. I'm curious, was Yair also playing? Yeah, it was the same deck. I think he wasn't. He's not playing red, but he's playing, what is it? One giant cape actually instead of red, which is interesting. So 3 tool cards in general. which I kind of do like. Yeah, so no baby Altaria. And I don't know, did either of these players lose? I'm actually really curious. So Froggy X Atomics lost this week in Greninja, and he had lost once to Magnezone or Ikorio in the tournament, and then Yair lost to Magnezone or Ikorio in top 8. And then lost to Hydreigon, and then Mega Blaziken. A lot of people said this deck list struggles into Hydreigon, but in my experience, it's actually not that bad of a matchup. The only times where you're going to lose is if they do get back-to-back Hydreigons, because realistically, we'll just attack with Giratina, or if they KO Giratina, we just revenge KO with Altaria, and then we just sort of sweep them with Altaria. And that's what happens most of the time. I actually think the Hydreigon matchup's not that bad. You want to leave Giratina most of the time with that deck. But yeah, neither of these players here would have ever been able to make it over the Magnezone players, just because they're not playing Baby Altaria. So keep that in mind. In tournament play, I do think that this is a strong deck list, but I would probably recommend that you play the non-EX Altaria, just because in tournament play, you're going to want to just win, whereas in ranked, you'll just tie or whatever and move on. In ranked, you don't see that much Ikorio. At least I don't, relatively speaking. But if you make it into day 2 and in tournament, you're inevitably probably going to hit 1 or 2, right? So something to keep in mind. Flyburson, let's take a look here at his standard, Mega Altaria deck. This is a deck that's really kind of become forgotten for some reason. I think, people are just sort of playing Altaria in other ways. They're playing it with Greninja, the high roll slop version of the deck, which is a broken deck. We'll talk about it. Or they're playing it with the Giratina and DD stuff, just to be a little bit more frontline and consistent. This deck list has a lot going for it. It leans heavily into the Chingling stuff, right? We're playing double Mars, double Chingling. That is the core of the deck. In fact, they're actually playing one Sing, one Friend to Friend Swablu. I wouldn't put too much stock in this. Realistically, we're playing double Lissia Pokeball. Just play Sing Swablu. It's going to win you games sometimes. That's my 2 cents. But I mean, Find a Friend's also fine. It's just, I think Sing's a stronger ability or a stronger attack. So yeah, very standard stuff here. It's just a standard deck list. Nothing too crazy here. But yeah, double Rocky Helmet as well with 1 Repel. I like the Repel in the deck. I just like this deck list a lot. He's not playing Sabrina, which is interesting. I think he just replaced Sabrina with Repel. But typically you'd play 1 Cyrus, 1 Sabrina. It's a good deck list. If Mega Altaria, even this traditional version, were to win, I don't think anyone would really be surprised, right? I think that Altaria is just such a strong card that no matter kind of how you played it, it's going to be good. It just depends on whether you'd rather play a more consistent version or a more high roll type version of the deck list here. Let's take a look at Ventry XD's deck, because I think this is just going to be similar but a little different. Yeah. So excuse me. We're not actually playing Indeedee. So we're not playing Indeedee. And we're playing one of these Spiteful Dance Oricorios, which is pretty cool. So this is a revenge KO Pokemon. It's like Marshadow, but psychic type. So 1 energy, 80 damage if one of your Pokemon got KO'd the turn prior. It does lead to a little bit more of an aggressive line for going 1-1-2, right? Especially if Shingling's not that useful, right? If Shingling goes down early, we can come in, deal 80 damage with Oricorio, and that can kind of pair pretty nicely, right, with Altaria. So you're not forced to go Chingling, Altaria. It's actually a pretty strong card, so I kind of do like it. Hold on, let me go back to the deck list. So I do like this. The Ditto's interesting. So this is the copy of Friend Ditto, which is going to be able to utilize the attacks of Pokemon on your bench, I believe, except EXs. So that's interesting. So I guess Ditto's here to just sort of copy maybe Jirachi or Oricorio, I suppose. So maybe you go Oricorio into Ditto or Ditto into, I don't know. It's an interesting card, actually. Probably not that bad in this deck. You could even Sing if you wanted to. You could even copy Jingly Noise, although you'll have to attach an energy to do it. You could even attach an energy and then use Jirachi Star Drop attack. It technically has more HP than Jirachi, which is interesting. But yeah, double Pokeball, 1 Lissia, right? So we're playing 3 Pokemon below 60. No, we're playing Swallow. Interesting there. He's playing double Pokeball, 1 Lissia. With how many Pokemon are 50 HP and below? Because we are playing, what is this, 5 basic Pokemon with 50 HP or less. I would have played double Lissia personally, but I guess he's already playing, 1 Copycat, 1 Cyrus, 1 Mars, 1 double Research. It's an interesting deck. Yeah, I mean, again, I think the Chingling Altaria stuff is the core of the deck, so whatever you pair with, it's probably gonna have less impact realistically than playing other things. Anyway, next up, let's take a look at Rizzleby's deck, playing Mega Steelix and Skarmory. Very fun. Yeah, I mean, what do you guys think here about Mega Steelix Skarmory? So we are still playing the Brock package to kind of set up Mega Steelix. Now, the main version that Mega Steelix we've been seeing is the Pichu or Oricorio package, but this Skarmory is a pretty aggressive card. 80 HP, 50 damage, right? If we have a tool card attached. Rocky Helmet, 1 Heavy Helmet, double Steel Apron. The Steel Apron's probably going to be pretty relevant, protecting you from sleep from Swablu, but also Mega Lopunny Confusions, Mega Blaziken Burn, things like that. But Mega Steelix here, is not a bad card. It's interesting, like in some matchups, this is going to be relevant, right? Because, you know, damage reduction can be really good. But like most Pokemon in the game, I would say are just going to 2-hit KO kind of regardless. Just because like they're playing Rocky Helmets, they're hitting for 130, 140 damage. Suicune, I guess, like 120. So there's some scenarios where like maybe we can make that work. It's just a little bit, it's just awkward. You know what I mean? Like there's some breakpoints where Mega Steelix is going to be relevant, right? Because we have 220 HP. We're taking, what is this? So it's minus 20 when he attacks. Heavy Helmet's minus 20, so that's minus 40. So, I mean, you know, you'd have to hit it for, I don't know, whatever that is. I guess like 160 damage twice or something. No, be 150. You have to hit it for 150 twice, right, to KO it. But the thing is, Rocky Helmet doesn't, Rocky Helmet's super common. And when Rocky Helmet, it doesn't... Okay, so let me put it this way. Mega Steelix is only dealing 120 damage, so it's not 1-hit KOing really anything at all, other than, yeah, nothing really. So it's 2-hit KOing, but everything's playing Rocky Helmet, and Rocky Helmet doesn't take into effect the damage mitigation, right? It's only from attack, so you're still taking 20 from Rocky Helmets. And that ends up just being a little bit a lot to deal with, realistically, for Mega Steelix, and at the end of the day, it's also a really slow card, right? Because the only energy accelerating we have in this deck is Brock. So these Skarmories are going to get kind of ran through pretty quick. And then once the Skarmory goes down, like if we don't have a second Skarmory, then we have Mega Steelix. And if we do bring in second Skarmory, we're having to attach to it. So most of the time against a lot of decks, that especially like Greninja decks, which are just going to like go around the Skarmories, they're just going to like ping the Onix or the Steelix and then bring it up. And then you're probably going to struggle there. But most of the time, even if they go through the Skarmories, like you're probably going to be sitting with the Mega Steelix in the active for like a turn or two before you can attack, right? So Mega Steelix is a slower deck. If it was 3 energies, I think this deck would actually be a lot stronger. I think this card would be a lot stronger. I think that both Mega Steelix and Lopunny were just like a little bit off being meta. You know, they just didn't make them like a little bit strong enough. They just need to be a little bit better for them to be a little bit more viable. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's Skarmory, right? And I think Skarmory is going to actually be pretty effective in a lot of different stuff here, being able to KO basics and whatnot. Curious about his matchups. What did he play against? Yeah, he played, he missed a round, so he lost round 1. Beat Altaria, lost to Suicune, beat Altaria, beat 2 Suicunes, beat Melmetal, which was an interesting story this tournament. Beat an Altaria yet again, and then beat Jolteon, beat Altaria. So this is a deck that probably thrived hitting Altaria 4 times. 5 times. I actually ended up losing to Altaria, which is kind of interesting in top 16. But yeah, a very interesting deck, you know, sort of a strange anti-meta call. I think that like you typically won't see like steel type Steelix high up in the standings, but this week Altaria was very, very prominent, which is probably a big reason why it did well. But anyway, that's the Steelix deck, so shout out to him. The last deck we're going to take a look at here in today's video, we'll cover some decks later in this week, but this is going to be the 15th place deck, 15th and 16th place here. We'll take a look at King Solomon's deck here from Puerto Rico. And this is Altaria and Greninja. I gotta let you guys know that I went on an 11 win streak with Altaria Greninja in ranked recently. And this is a deck list that is just so like it fluctuates so heavily based off of the RNG and drawing cards that I feel crazy when I play this deck. Also, there was a game I played where took me forever to draw my Greninja and my Rare Candy. They were like the last 4 cards of my deck. But my Swablu kept my opponent's Indeedee asleep in the active spot for a total of, no joke, 11 turns in a row. I sleepwalked an Indeedee for 11 turns with this deck, and then ended up just drawing Greninja with like 4 cards in my deck, and then just won the game that way. And it was ridiculous. But that's what this type of deck does to you. And you know, this is a deck, honestly, guys, that like I don't even know what to say about this deck. It's so RNG. Like, not only do we have to, like, you know, draw, you know, he's actually playing only one Chingling, one Jirachi, which I noticed. So typically you play double Chingling, but the one Jirachi is interesting for sure. I don't know how common that is, but that's an interesting thing to note. But anyway, like, you got to realize that you're probably just going to want to lead Chingling. You're going to want to draw Froakie. You're going to want to draw Swablu. Froakie is 60 HP, so you can't search it with Lissia. You got to find it with Pokeball. And then you also got to draw Rare Candy Greninja. You got to draw Mega Altaria. There's just so many moving parts to this deck list, but theoretically speaking, you could go turn 2 Mega Altaria with Greninja and Cyrus in hand, and then the game's over, right? And Copycat does allow this to be a little bit more consistent than you might think. This deck list is just so RNG, but it's the high upside to this deck if everything goes your way. It's so ridiculous. This is like potentially the strongest deck ever in Pokemon Pocket. It's like Suicune Greninja, but like a bit more high-end powerful, but just a little bit less consistent. It actually loses this week in Greninja in the head-to-head matchup slightly, just because I think consistency reasons. But it's a very, very, very strong deck, just very inconsistent. But anyway, yeah, I went on an 11 win streak with this deck. Yeah, so the only difference here is that he's playing, what is this, one Jirachi, one Chingling, which again is interesting. Kind of makes sense with Double Cyrus, but Chingling is somewhat broken. So yeah, one of the biggest factors to this deck when you're playing against other Chingling decks is going into Swablu and then trying to put the Chingling asleep so that you can rare Candy on the following turn. It's just a crazy deck. I have nothing else to really say about this, guys. It was extremely popular, and it was actually like the most successful deck in day one. So if we go ahead, which we'll do in a little bit, we'll go to the metagame data. More Altaria Greninjas in day 2 than any other deck. So it actually performed quite well in terms of its day 2 conversion rate. We'll break it all down. Shout out to all these other players. We'll kind of highlight these decks here. Sylveon Greninja, which is pretty cool. Charizard, Magnezone, Galvantula. A lot of really fun decks were featured. Melmetal. A lot of fun decks were featured in the live stream. And then later this week, we'll break down some of these decks that maybe did make top 16 in our like off-meta showcase video. We'll do that later this week. But anyway, that's the deck list. All of the top decks this week. And then what we're going to do now to end in the video is go to the metagame tab and we'll break down all of the metagame data. If you made it this far in the video, I appreciate it. Comment down below. Tell me that you made it this far in the video for sure. But this is where all of the data comes in, and it gives us like an accurate reflection of what's going on. I know some people don't watch this part of the video. I always say it. It's like numbers. People might not be that interested. But if you're actually curious about what's going on in the meta, like this is the part of the video that kind of explains it. So let's dive into it. Anyway, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe. So yeah, here was the overall metagame data for the tournament. So Suicune Greninja, still the most played deck, 16% meta share. So down from like the 20-25% range that it was in the last couple of weeks. So it's gone down a little bit. Its win rate wasn't that substantial, actually, 48.13%. This does incorporate people who missed rounds or dropped and didn't actually drop from the tournament. So all of the win rates that you see here are inflated like negatively, but they're all relative to each other. So keep that in mind. Also, like the higher representation a deck has, the more closely it'll fall to 50% because it plays itself in brackets. Anyway, Suicune Greninja, 16% meta share here and 48% win rate, which again are all a lot lower than what we've seen in previous weeks. So there is a decline moment going on now for Suicune Greninja. This is to be expected just because it's a bit of a rebound effect. Suicune Greninja was extremely dominant in the last week or two. So, this was sort of the time where, the meta would sort of correct itself. So yeah, I expect Suicune Greninja to kind of float around 15% probably for the rest of the season. And probably still be relevant. The second most played deck, though, was Altaria and Greninja. Now, you got to keep in mind, Altaria here is represented in a variety of different deck lists. So if you add up all of the Altaria decks, it's by far the most played deck or the most played Pokemon in the game, like by a pretty wide margin. But the most popular version of Altaria was Altaria Greninja here with almost 11% of the meta share. And it had a 50% win rate, 170 to 170. And which is pretty, honestly, it's kind of impressive when you think about it. Yeah, so when you compare it to like really all of the other decks, it did quite well with a 50% win rate, but its day 2 conversion rate was extremely high. So I'll just kind of point that out right now, right? So take a look at this. This is 10% of the meta, the second most played deck, right? But if we go to day 2 specifically, it jumps up to 17.5% meta share. So that's like a, what is that? Like a plus 7% day 2 conversion rate. And it was the most played deck in day 2, but it did struggle in day 2. And again, I think that's probably because of Magnezone or Coriolis. We can actually just take a look at this. Well, I guess in day 2, we can't look at that specifically, but its matchups in day 2 probably resulted in it losing a lot to Magnezone or Ikoria, but it was the most successful deck in day 1, technically. But as we've seen, Suicune Greninja here, the second most represented deck, it had a negative day 2 conversion rate for the first time in a while, actually did quite well in day 2. Realistically, 15-7. So, a lot of these other decks that made day 2, just all of the matchups for these 7 Suicune Greninja players, were probably fairly favorable. Suicune Greninja is just a strong deck list. The big story here, though, is Magnezone or Ikoria, which again here, almost 10% of the day 2 meta share, but in day 1, only 3.7%. And look at this win rate in day 1, by the way, guys. 60%, 61%, 75 and 45. So Magnezone or Ikoria absolutely dominated. And there is a reason for that. Let's take a look at all of these decks here at the top of the metagame standings. Suicune Greninja loses to Magnezone or Ikoria. Altaria Greninja loses to Magnezone or Ikoria. Hydreigon does beat Magnezone or Ikoria, but Altaria here, both of these Altaria decks, all of them lose to Magnezone or Ikoria, right? So that's sort of the placement of it. Even though only 3.5% of the tournament played Magnezone or Ikoria, it did very, very well. We can actually take a look at its matchup data here. We'll see. Look at this. 14-6 against Suicune, 12-5 against Mega Altaria and Indeedee, 6-12 into Hydreigon, so not great. 14-3 into Altaria Greninja, 6-4 into Blaziken, 7-2 into Mega Altaria Giratina, 4-4 against itself, and then 2-1 into Venusaur and whatnot. So basically anything relevant in the metagame that's not Hydreigon like loses to Magnezone or Ikoria. It really goes to show that it is sort of the one deck right now that is sort of counter to, you know, a lot of the decks considered to be meta right now. Particularly Altaria, to be fair. But still good into Suicune. Had a good performance against Suicune this weekend. Anyway, what else were we talking about here? Yeah, so Mega Altaria here also about 50%. Hydreigon struggled. So let's take a look at this is Hydreigon's day 1 performance. It struggled. So against, you know, the entirety of the metagame, Hydreigon's really not a strong option. 9% of the meta share here. In day 2, it went to about 9 and also 9% and had a 7-6 record. So Hydreigon pretty average in day 2, but also like look at this this win rate here, 114 to 129. That's a 46% win rate. That's lower than really anything else until you get into like the fringe meta decks, right? So again, like if Magnezone or Ikoria really rises in play, then Hydreigon becomes obviously maybe a more valuable option. But when you think about Hydreigon, you think about it as a deck that can compete against other decks in the metagame. The reality is that it's just not that strong into a lot of these most popular matchups here. If we take a look at its matchup spreads, you'll notice kind of the similar idea here. 12-22 into Suicune, 10-17 into Altaria and Greninja. It was 14-10 though into this Giratina Altaria deck, and 12-9 into basic Altaria, and then 12-6 here into Magnezone or Ikoria. So slightly favorable matchups into these other Altaria decks that aren't Greninja, but everything else here is pretty bad, pretty average. It does beat Decidueye though, which is pretty cool. But yeah, good into Magnezone or Ikoria. So again, if you're losing to Suicune Greninja and you're losing to Altaria Greninja, which are the two most popular decks, why are we playing Hydreigon? I just don't really understand this. You're kind of just feeding the two decks that are already dominating the metagame, and you're kind of just trying to stop the counter to those decks. I don't get it. So, you know, that's the overall story of what the metagame, at least at this point, is developed into. It's the Greninja decks that are high roll, very, very strong. They kind of beat everything, but they lose to Magnezone or Ikoria, right? And then there's Hydreigon, which people are still playing, again, even though it loses to these decks, but beats Magnezone or Ikoria. So it's an interesting development here. Let's take a look at Mega Altaria and Giratina, which again here you'll notice 127 to 117 is actually higher than all of these other win rates technically, other than Magnezone or Ikoria. That is a 52% win rate. But you'll notice here that this is a deck list that does not love to play against the Greninja stuff, right? And it doesn't like Magnezone. So how is this deck getting its wins, right? That's kind of the big question. These are its most common matchups, which is interesting. No. We got to filter by most common matchups. All right. So look at this, 23-29 into Suicune, so a slightly losing matchup, 12-20 into Altaria Greninja, also slightly losing matchup, 10-14, slightly losing into Hydreigon, 10-10 against itself, 7-10, also losing to the basic Altaria version, and 2-7 into Magnezone. So into basically all meta decks, this is a deck that kind of struggles, but if you take a look at its win rates against all of the other decks basically in the tournament, it's kind of like a pub stomper deck, like 5-0 into Dark Magnezone, 5-0 into Dark Greninja, 3-0 into Jolteon, you know, undefeated into like Venusaur and Charizards and Blazikens and stuff. Like this is a deck that beats basically, it's actually 2-5 into Hydreigon EX right here, but 5-2 into Decidueye. So it's basically a deck that beats like it's just such a consistent deck, and it's in generally powerful. It kind of beats everything that's like fringe / non-meta. So it's kind of like a pub stomper deck, just in general, very, very strong. But into the Greninja decks, it's going to struggle. Into Hydreigon, it's kind of going to struggle. Into Magnezone or Ikoria. The data here into Magnezone or Ikoria says it struggled, but if we go to the cards here, it's because less than 50% of these players were actually playing Baby Altaria. So if in tournament play, if you're playing this deck, I would play Baby Altaria. But again, if we go back to the standings for the overall tournament, the highest placing Altaria decks in the tournament were this deck. So, I mean, it's just, I think consistency goes a long way for a deck list like this. And I do think that it's a quality deck, but I think that the metagame right now is so heavily dominated by just like the Greninja slop that it's like, you know, it's tough to play something that's like not Greninja or counter to Greninja, you know what I mean? And that's not a deck that plays Chingling, right? So that's the other thing about that deck. You're playing Altaria, but you're not playing Chingling, which in a metagame right now, heavily dominated by Greninjas and Hydreigons, like you probably want to play Chingling, because that's really the one calling card for Altaria, is that it plays Chingling, and then you can beat those decks that way. But anyway, that's kind of somewhat interesting here. If we filter by win rate, we can kind of find maybe some standouts here. Like Melmetal was a decent standout. It went 12-7 this tournament. None of them made day 2, but they all did pretty well. A couple of one-of decks, right, that we saw that like made day 2 and did pretty well. But the highest win rate deck out of anything that really saw play was Magnezone, in the degrees of Magnezone, and then Altaria Giratina here. So like those are the standouts, right? Magnezone or Ikoria, just really, really good into all of those common meta decks. And another version of Magnezone or Oricorio here also did well. And then Giratina and Altaria, which again, just very consistent, just a very, very consistent deck and beats all of these like kind of slop decks, honestly. I say slop, but just like non-meta decks, you know, things that aren't really considered to be popular, probably just lose to that deck because it's so in general strong and whatnot. But everything else here is pretty standard here. Most things fell around 50% as they typically do, but that's kind of the metagame there. And that's sort of the, that's kind of like the story of the tournament, realistically. And that's what the metagame's looking like right now. So, you know, like I said, we have another week. So we have next weekend's tournament. And then after that, it's going to be like B2 season, which is pretty fun. And the announcements should start rolling in soon. Ranked battles are out as well. So, you know, feel free to play ranked. I'll give my update at the end of the week as to sort of what decks I would play, especially in ranked, because that's certainly what most people are competing in right now. And the ranked metagame is a little bit different than tournament meta, but most of the decks are somewhat the same. It's just sort of, you know, it can be a little bit different, but the metagame is going to change throughout the week because of all of the other tournaments that are happening. So at the end of the week on Friday, I'll give my update. I'll go live a couple of times maybe this week for ranked battles, so that should be fun. But yeah, that's the meta update this week. That's what's going on. Let me know what you guys think. Comment down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for playing, by the way, in PMPT number 16 and all of our tournaments. We've been doing our best to kind of do these on a weekly basis and supply the prizing. We have a massive team of judges and moderators and the casters, of course, that make it all happen. So, you know, I got to give a big thanks to everybody doing it. I know it's like the Pocket Mads tournament series, but like I'm just here sort of hosting it, and it's a whole bunch of other team of people that make it happen. So I'm just glad we're able to do this and continue to do this. I'm excited for the invitational. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. Hang in there. This is really my message, right? The metagame right now is like kind of basically a reflection. It's an extension of, you know, last season's metagame because not much really changed. It was a little bit different at the beginning because we had things like Altaria and Steelix and whatnot, but at this point, the only real substantial difference to the metagame after Crimson Blaze is the buff to Magnezone or Oricorio. And I think that B2 will change things. So hang in there because once B2 comes out, once the next full set comes out, probably 2 packs, there's going to be massive changes to the metagame. If anybody remembers when Spacetime Smackdown came out about a year ago, the metagame changed so dramatically. And I think we're about to see another sort of seismic shift like that. We're just gonna have to wait a couple of weeks for that to happen. So enjoy ranked battles, enjoy, you know, everything kind of going on. I would love, you know, I would love to hear what your guys' opinions are and everything, but, you know, continue to play in the tournaments, play in ranked, just have fun playing Pokemon Pocket. And once the news comes out, we're going to cover all of it and it'll be a lot of fun for sure. I'm excited for that, but, there it is, guys. Let's wrap up the video. Peace out. Sorry, I've been sick. So I know I've been so sick lately. But I'm kind of hopefully coming out of it and hopefully I'll go live more. But yeah, we're on the road to 50,000 subscribers, guys. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. Stay tuned. We got videos coming out tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, leading up into next weekend's tournament. And yeah, guys, there it is. All right, peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. I don't know how to end the video still. So all right, guys. Bye.